We have a few folks still coming in, and I know several others are still on their way, but we do want to go ahead and get started on time. So with that, you should have a copy of the agenda, our basics, and a couple PowerPoint presentations that are inside. And this is always a great time to come together to update the team on information sharing. I want to welcome one of our board members, Mr. Mike Gallo. So he's here with us today. So welcome, Mr. Gallo. Always good. And just to remind you, I think most of you have been to an extended cabinet meeting before, but the purpose of this meeting, it was established to help us have clear communication, celebrate accomplishments, and provide critical feedback to key issues in order to meet our objectives. And one of the things that came to my brought to my attention, recently, when we were having a discussion on A to G and all the work that's going on behind the scenes on the A to G curriculum, all the work that's going on behind the scenes around citations and the board's discussions around the citation policy and the work that's going on there. How do we get all that information back out, not just to the people in this room, but to everybody? So if I'm at the front line of any position in the district, whether I'm a student, staff member, et cetera, how do we share information? And so we're going to be working on ways to utilize the video that's here, as well as possibly a weekly or maybe every other week update from the team, a video update from the team of some sort, that gets the word out about the things that are going on in the district, because information is like oxygen, and without it we begin to hallucinate. And there's so many things going on in the district, so many great things, so many challenges that we face. Being a district, it's a large urban district, and so to help our team, which is large, feel smaller, we want to continue to strengthen our communication approach. And so I mention that just because the purpose of this meeting is to establish a way to communicate, but it's not enough. You can never communicate enough, and we want to continue to strengthen that. So keys to success are here. We're going to run the meeting with a sense of discipline and consistency. It may last anywhere from 90 to 120 minutes. And our rational outcome today is to understand the district's budget. So we have some experts from our own staff, as well as from School Services of California, who will come and provide an update so that you'll have a chance to see what the budget is. And what we'll do between each of these presentations is have you digest the information and talk it through. What did you hear? What did you think you heard? What questions do you have? Because the goal is, if you can come out and help us think about what information we do need to share back out to the rest of our entire San Bernardino City community, that'll be helpful to us. So this is your advice to us. It helps us get the word out to others. What do we need to pay attention to? What information do we need to share? How can we best share that? So please think about that as we're going on down the road. And then we always like to start with celebrations. So we're going to do that, and then Dr. Volkemer is going to walk us through our basics and guidelines for excellence. I think we're having a little trouble with a microphone. Somebody, I think, is adjusting that. Or maybe I need to stand in a different spot. Let me try backing up, see if that helps. So with that, what are some celebrations around here that we should mention to the whole team? We've had a few things going on, some that are on your radar. Dr. Zamora, here's a microphone that I think is on mute, but we'll turn that off.
So we just got notice today that Roosevelt Elementary is a finalist in the Golden Ribbon Award, which is now the old Distinguished School of California Award. So very exciting. They were just notified today. So they're a finalist in the Golden Ribbon Award.
Fantastic. And I think there are a couple others as well. Is that accurate? Who are the others? I think there are
I don't know if we've gotten official notification on any of the others, but there were 6 that applied, all total.
6 that applied, and there's a few we've heard from so far that may also be receiving that award. So that's a big congratulations. What other celebrations do we have among us? You may or may not have heard we have 2 schools that are schools to watch, Curtis Middle School and thank you, Serrano Middle School. So congratulations to both of them. That's a huge deal. Only 2 out of 13 in the state, so that's a big deal when you have only 13 schools, middle schools in the entire state of California, and 2 of ours were named as schools to watch. That's fantastic. Ray, you have a celebration?
Yeah, it's going to be a celebration also to piggyback on Dr. Zamora. When I met with Roosevelt this morning, I've been meeting with principals as we go along every day. They had 0 suspensions. 0 suspensions, and restorative justice was operating. So I just want to give them kudos for that. You can give them a
Fantastic.
call. And then the second thing is, if you haven't got a chance, we expanded our youth court based on some of the things that's happening in the district. Youth court is now operational, fully going. The kids are actually participating, and it's working out well. We see a whole lot of things happening. The key word that I want to keep everybody in mind is recidivism. That's our new word going forward, but right now the recidivism rate is really low, so we're happy about that.
Fantastic. And Ray, just quickly, how many students do we have trained to sit on youth court panels right now?
As it stands right now, we have 80 students trained to actually go in and sit on the youth courts. The last training was about 2 weeks ago at San Bernardino High School, and I think you attended the first one early in March. So right now we have 80. We're going to be expanding more, and now it's just a matter of just controlling the volume and the flow.
Fantastic. Thanks. Give Ray a hand on that effort. You know, and just in means of communicating, you know, recent discussions around the citation policy. I'm trying to think if we do have a check-in time, and so Keenan may bring some of this up. You may want to talk more about the work going on with our citations policy. But one thing we want to really clarify, and this will probably come out in a video from me as we talk with some of our stakeholders, as we create our new policy on citations, some are mistaken thinking that we're somehow lowering the standard for students in terms of their behavior. You know, for example, if they bring a knife to school for the first time, or marijuana, you know, a small amount of marijuana to school for the first time, that there's no consequence. That is so far from the truth. There may be no citation, but there will be a very specific line of consequence that will probably be even greater than what existed before to ensure that students get on a trajectory of success and don't get into this downward spiral of going on a citation and prison pipeline kind of journey. So stay tuned. We'll get some more of that information out to you as we develop that. But that I think is worth mentioning. What other celebrations exist among us? This is great news. Yeah, Gonzalo.
I just wanted to acknowledge all educational services and also the sites. This year we're doing our first science fair from the district office. It's currently going on right now. The awards ceremony will be actually this Thursday, so you're all invited.
Fantastic. All right. Great. Give them a hand. That's great. Anything else? Anybody else with some personal celebrations going on? Yes, Anna.
Okay, I do have a personal, and I don't want to admit it, but I'm going to be a grandmother now of 5 grandchildren.
Hey, all right.
So
Fantastic.
the 5th one's on the way, and 3 years ago I had none, and I was complaining, so.
Very good. Yeah, and last week during I think it was our principals meeting, I shared my own, I have 4 children, so my oldest daughter, who is, will be 20, but she's 19 now, is planned to be married. So she's engaged, so I'm very excited about that. So this is the first new journey for us, so fun stuff. Great. Anybody else? Rose.
Good afternoon. On February 23rd, next week, Arroyo Valley High School will be receiving their Gaston Award at a special assembly on campus with the students.
Fantastic. That's great. Yeah, and the Gaston Caperton Award, again, is given by the College Board. We recently presented a couple months ago, I guess now, in D.C., and met with them and were recognized for the award. We're the only large urban in America to receive the Gaston Caperton Award, showing growth for students ready for college. We have a long way still to go till more of our kids are ready for college. But the point is, at several of our schools, that growth was quite significant. So they recognize that, and then we also presented at the Western Regional Conference, and I think they're planning us to present at another conference as well because it's so positive. And I also want to just compliment and thank Rose for her leadership. Rose Alama is serving as the interim principal at Arroyo Valley High School. And then last night, our board took action to approve Lizette Lovett as principal. Dr. Lovett will be the principal at Arroyo Valley High School. And so that did I what I got McGuine? Oh, I'm sorry, so sorry, McGuine. Yes, so that's the last slide. Why did I have Lovett? It was. I apologize. That's what I missed. Thank you. So, with that, I wanted to mention that. I'm trying to think any other celebrations or accomplishments.
I have one. At the Academic Decathlon Awards Dinner last week, 7 of our students got individual awards, and out of the entire county, San Gregonio came in 10th place. It's an honor to get top 10, and Cajon got 7th place. So we did pretty well. We're going to gun for those top spots next year.
Fantastic. Great.
One more. Friday, February 19th at Sierra High School, we're having a Classrooms Creating a Bridge to Careers, and we actually have one of the presenters to our students, Heidi Smith. She's a Bell Award winner. She's an elementary school principal that's flying down from Northern California, and she picked up her Bell Award from the President of the United States of America before Christmas time. So she's going to be one of our speakers sharing her story with our students.
Fantastic. That's great news. Great. Give her a hand. That's fantastic.
On March 5th, Saturday, the San Bernardino City Unified School District is hosting for the first time the Odyssey of the Mind competition within our own district, and so we'll be able to showcase some of the things going on. But that'll be occurring at Indian Springs High School. We're expecting about 2,000 people from around the region to be attending and seeing. So I think it's a great way to showcase the investment in the facilities, investment in what our students are doing, and making sure that we're moving forward. So it's a great resource.
Fantastic. Great. Mahan. Got a celebration over here from Joe, our chief of police. By the way, Joe's been asked, not only did he and Eric Vatier, Harold Volkemer, and Linda Bardier present to all of our county soups on December 2nd, and our learnings from that and appropriate best next steps, they get presented there, but Joe's also been invited to present to the LA County Office of Education, so we're excited about that opportunity for Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Marsden. Robert, can you stand, please? Yeah, this young man, I'm real proud of his leadership. Now, Robert is our first explorer in the traditional program of this department. He's been involved for years. He's just been promoted to coordinator in that Explore program, which is our next step in our cadet program. So if you guys could give him a hand in regards to his leadership.
Fantastic.
And my last celebration is this. If you guys know, a couple months ago, our department was at the tip of the spear when it comes to the inner perimeter of providing security for our president's visit to our city. We was a department that was tasked with that inner perimeter. It was a photograph that was taken prior to us taking our stance at Indian Springs. That photograph was sent to the White House to be signed by the president. I just got word today that he signed it and it's on its way to San Bernardino. Thank you.
That's great. Fantastic. Good news. Well, again, welcome everybody, and the goal today is to share with you information that will be helpful as the district continues to go forward to make decisions for the entire direction that we're setting. So with that, Harold, if you could lead us through our basics.
Thank you, Dr. Marsden. And just to piggyback on what Joe said, when President Obama was here visiting with the families of the victims of our December 2nd tragedy, he used a mirror to do a little final prep before he went to visit with them. And that mirror is hanging in a clothes closet at Pacific High School right now. So we actually have President Obama's mirror in a clothes closet at Pacific High School. So if you want to go by and check that out, feel free to do so. So anyway, we're going to do something a little bit different for basics today. One of the things we're trying to do with our basics is have them become something bigger and more powerful than just words on paper. And to know them is one thing, to own them and be energized by them is another thing. And so what we're trying to do is shift away from drawing a connection between the theme of a meeting and our basics. We all know that to come to extended cabinet or at a school board meeting or principals meeting or a committee type meeting, that we're going to be able to relate to the meeting guidelines and the basics for excellence. But what we're really trying to start to promote more is living the basics for excellence, is really embodying what they mean in terms of living them out on a day-to-day basis. And so what we're going to do today is play basics tag. Okay, and so here's your task. I'm going to give you about 1.5 minutes, not a lot of time, and I want you to look around the room, and I want you to find someone who embodies one of the basics for excellence. Okay, it can be anyone in terms of service or sense of purpose, positive passion, any one of those. But what you want to be able to say is, I believe, and I'll just pick Charles for a second. I believe tag, you're it. I believe Charles exemplifies positive passion in what he does every day because of da-da-da-da. And that's how he's living it, and he can be an example to all of us. Okay, so I've already picked my person. It's not Charles, even though Charles is very deserving. I've picked my person, so I'm going to give you about 1.5 minutes to look around the room and identify someone that exemplifies one of the basics for excellence. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to start. I'm going to go tag someone, tell you why I think they exemplify the basics for excellence, and that person's going to go tag someone, that person's going to go tag someone, et cetera, and we'll give it about 5 minutes and get to as many people as we can. Everybody understand the exercise? Okay. You have about 1.5 minutes to identify who you're going to go tag. That's okay? So I'm going to start. I'm going to tag Angela Urquides. Tag, because Angela consistently demonstrates positive passion for our foster youth. She goes out of her way. She has actually absolutely made it her heart to look out for, identify, number one, that was the first choice, or first task, identify and serve our foster youth and making sure they're getting a good education. So I want to tag Angela Urquides for positive passion.
I want to tag Dennis because he is exactly what we look for in service. He consistently and effectively serves all of our schools, all of our students, all of our families, and he's amazing at what he does for our after-school programs.
Thank you. I was actually going to choose Angela too, but Dr. Wolfer beat me to it, so. I'm going to come over here to Marie. Sorry. She has rescued me more times than not, and have that kind of service to understand that our kids are transported safely, also for big events, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I want to tag my partner in non-crime, Eric Vatier, because it doesn't matter what the situation with the crisis, we work so well together. His passion and dedication to this district, to this community, and to our kids is just evident in everything he does, and he's a great partner to work with.
Thank you. I'll give you your $20 later. I'm tagging Adrian. So no matter where we're at, Adrian's always got a smile on her face, so I tagged her for positive passion. We had a parking lot conversation today, and she's under the state scrutiny coming up, and she still has a smile on her face and is still positive about what's going to come out of it. So,
I'm going to pick Luis Chavez, and I'm picking Luis because he's been a big supporter for me in my department, in my operational strategic plan. He's also been very helpful in helping me do my Harvest of the Month program, which I think both of us found to be an excellent experience for our kids. So I want to thank him for everything he's done for us.
I'm sorry. No.
And I wanted to say, sorry about that, I say his emotional commitment to the kids and making sure that the kids always come first. Thank you.
And being in a new school and having all the different things, I want to tag facilities with summer, because we finally, after many, many efforts, we are building a new playground for our kids, playground structure. So it took us a lot of effort, and John Parker and Summer have been on a positive passion for giving the schools what they really need.
Thank you so much. So if the person was tagged before, can we tag him again or something like that? I will tag Karen Cunningham for her service and her commitment basically to the programs, and thank you so much for your support on the work that you did for us.
Thank you. I'm going to tag John Poikert. I worked with him for 17 years. He was always professional. He had a sense of purpose. He was always driven to provide the best service for all the kids under his division.
Joe, I'm going to tag you for the service, your commitment to the safety and security of the kids, and not only them, but the safety of our community.
Thanks, John. Mike Medina, Parameter Trust. He's a man that can be trusted, a man that you can put your life in his hands. We worked the streets for years in San Bernardino. Mike was always there to make sure that I made it home. All right, Mike, bless you.
Thanks, sir. I'd like to tag Robert, our explorer, simply because he's been with us forever from the beginning of the program. Excuse me. Robert came to us as a junior explorer at Rodriguez Prep Middle School. Then Principal Dr. Wiseman, and Dr. Wiseman helped pave the path for us for junior explorers. And this young man came to us and has never left us. So it's really awesome to see him excel and promote to coordinator, and also assist all the younger kids coming up in the program and infusing themselves in our community.
Talking with Rodriguez, I would like to talk about Dr. Wiseman for service as well. You know, he does anything and would do anything for us. You know, like he did the pathway for junior explorers, and anytime we had any events at school, he would participate as well. We had we did our CSTs. He would come and jump with us in the jumpers. You know, he would go in and play with us. So that's a lot of service for us. Thank you.
Actually, Robert, I was going to choose you. I can't choose you and I was going to say sense of purpose, because I'm proud to see you grow and see that purpose. I have multiple people. I'm going to break the rules a little bit. It's been a little over 4 minutes. But I want to thank Ron and Robert and Peg, and there's a variety of things there, but I think the focus on results together. As you know, I work closely with the unions. Sometimes we don't see eye to eye, sometimes we do. It's tough work, it's complex work, and I think that we all have the same interests in mind, and that's the skill and knowledge of our staffs and the growth of our students. So I want to thank each of you for our partnership. So I don't know if this is the end, or each of you three have to choose one.
No, we'll bring it to an end. Thank you very much. Give yourselves a hand. If you didn't have a chance to tag your person in the activity, make sure you tag them on the way out or during the break or whatever. The idea is to let people know that they're living the basics, and we're noticing that. And that's what will reinforce and perpetuate living the ideals that we want to live out. So I'll turn it back over to Dr. Marsden.
You bet. Great activity. Hopefully that's one you can use with your own teams. With that, you have on your table some thank you notes. If you could take a minute now and write a thank you note or two to somebody who you know has really lived our values, our beliefs out in the work they do. It could be a parent, could be a student, could be a colleague, could be somebody who supported you in the organization. So please think about that for a moment, and then put the name and location on the front. We'll get it to them for you. And just leave it in the middle of the table. Let's take a minute to do that, please. Dr. Mitchell's going to walk you through our check-in process. He'll remind you of what that process is.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So we're going to do a check-in, and check-in is an activity that we use to allow you to get off any urgent matters on your mind right now. So we'd like for you to take a minute or two to discuss at your table any kind of hot button items that you're thinking about, questions that are burning that you may have, or just overall comments that you'd like to make that are things that are pressing or urgent from your perspective in the district. So take about a minute to do that, and we'll reconvene shortly. All right, so let's wrap up. And anyone want to start us off with a check-in? Any urgent items that you discussed at your table? You know, one thing comes to mind that we've had some questions about the last couple of weeks is our pilot high school graduation off campus. And so this year we're piloting 2 schools, Indian Springs and Pacific High School, that'll be hosting their graduation ceremonies at Cal State San Bernardino in the Casoulas Arena. It'll be the first year that we're doing that. As you know, many of our surrounding neighbors and districts have transferred their services to, the citizens in Casoulas and other large arenas. One of the first benefits that we're getting is that our high schools are spending about $30,000 per school on high school graduation ceremonies. We'll be able to host those ceremonies at Casoulas for $15,000, so that's half the price. Additionally, the facilities are air conditioned. As you know, our graduations are held, outside typically, and sometimes, our parents are, concerned about the heat during that time of year. So Casoulas is air conditioned, state-of-the-art sound system, 360-degree viewing, capacity of 3,800 seats, and so most of our students would be able to get more tickets than they've gotten in the past. And if you've been to a high school graduation, at the close of the ceremony and tried to get out of the parking in less than an hour, we won't have that problem. We'll have security and parking attendants that'll be ushering all the parking in and out. We'll also have VIP parking so that our elderly or handicapped or VIP will be able to go straight to the facilities. And so there's a whole lot of benefits. And so we won't have each school renting staging and seating and lighting and sound and decorations and tickets and all the stuff, because we've had our high schools operating as independent contractors, and now we're consolidating those graduations. And so we'll try it out, see how it goes. We also this year are busing our parents and students from Pacific and Indian Springs back and forth to Cal State. So we'll see how it goes. It'll be a pilot program. We'll do an after-action review and get some feedback from our parents and participants as well as our graduates, and then we'll see what happens for next year. So just wanted to put that on everyone's radar. Any other check-in items? All is well in San Bernardino then. Good, so let's move on to our next section. We'll bring up our Chief Business Officer, Janie Christakos.
Good afternoon. We are so fortunate to have Ron Bennett, the Chief Executive Officer of School Services of California. He's going to do a budget overview for this group. He loves questions, tough questions. A little bit about his history. He has a very rich history. He was in the Air Force. He's been a chief business officer for school districts, an assistant superintendent, deputy superintendent, superintendent. And interesting, he actually lived in this area, and his children attended our schools, so he has a lot of connections to our community. And we're so fortunate that he is here to speak with us today. He loves questions, so he's not afraid of anything. Anything you want to ask, and so he'll go through the presentation. If you want to stop him and get clarification, feel free to just raise your hand, and he loves to hear the questions.
Well, thank you, Janie, and thanks for keeping it short. You know, and I am afraid of something. Where's Harold? I want to know where Harold is, because I don't want Harold behind me. There he is. Okay, all right. And so we're all afraid of something, and that's my nemesis today. But before we before we start, I'd just like to tell you a little bit, before we get into the economics, about your district. And I get to do a lot of things. This morning I was dealing with some union district relationships down in Chula Vista, in that area. Tomorrow I'm going to be doing an impasse up in Los Angeles where they're going to fact-finding and they're having some difficulties. And I'd like you to know that since I look at a couple of hundred districts a year, what people would see if they saw your district. And I am always honored to be invited to these sessions. Dr. Marsden invited me to the first one when he became superintendent. And what you would see if you looked across the state and looked at your district is you would see that when the governor constructed the local control funding formula and the LCAP, you would be the poster child for that. You would be the district that he had in mind when he put that together. A district that had a lot of children who had been left behind for a long time, who had unique needs, and the state's funding system was inadequate for anyone to deal with those needs. And so the governor wanted to provide more money. He wanted to provide more flexibility with that money, and he wanted to provide it to districts like yours, where he trusted that local control would result in better programs for students than the state could devise and force on school districts, which they had been doing for 40 years. And over the last 2 or 3 years, this would be the district that the governor would hold up and say, this is what success looks like. There are districts that have more money than you, not so many, districts that have less money than you, but there are lots of districts that have not taken advantage of the opportunity for community involvement, for local control, for consensus building like you have. And I know that Dr. Marsden gets too much credit, but he should take it, because when things go wrong, he will also get too much of the blame. And so you should take the credit, because you're going to get the blame, and the board. But it's everybody being involved. And so when you look at your district, this would be the success story for California for the local control funding formula and the local control accountability plan. And as Janie said, I did live in this district, and I was looking for some administrators. I was looking for the principal at Shandon Hills Elementary about 25 years ago, or the principal at El Cajon High School. I had a wonderful daughter in this district, but I also had my son, who was a pain in the neck in this district, and I was looking for somebody that might have tried to expel him back then. And but I haven't seen any faces from that era yet today. So and I made a comment one time at the board meeting, and some of the board members will recall. This was the place that the Air Force sent children of Air Force members who needed a head start in public education. And so I was stationed at Norton Air Force Base twice, and we appreciated the education our kids got from this district, and so did everybody else out there. So it's always my honor to be invited back to talk about some of these public education issues. So how do I make that move? Anybody know how to make it move? Do we have a clicker someplace, or do we have an arrow key? You'll do it? Okay. All right. So I want to be respectful of your time, but I did want to remind you of who you are. And when you look around, you are the district that is succeeding. You're the district that others should be modeling. You know, I have a saying that everybody wants to innovate. Most people should not innovate. So John Poikert, he's an innovator. So when he took his level of expertise to the highest level that it was, then he innovated it and took it higher. But most people shouldn't innovate. They should imitate. They should find somebody better than them and then do what they're doing. And what I tell districts to do is do what you're doing. till they get as good as you are, then they can go innovate, right? Okay, so let's talk about the environment that you're working in. It's changing a little bit. We've had 3 good years for school funding. The governor is very concerned now that things are slowing down a little bit. So in his latest governor's budget that came out in January, he shows lower projections for the future. Our local control funding formula, thank you, Janet, was to be completed in 7 years. In 4 years, we're more than 90% of the way there. In fact, we're over 95% for next year. So the days when you get a big infusion of money every year are almost behind us. And you've done a great job of building programs, but also figuring out ways that you'll be able to maintain them after the big infusions of money every year are gone. So in January, the governor recognized that his estimates for revenues were low, so he raised them. He didn't raise them by enough, you know, he said that he was raising them because the revenues for the current year were coming in higher, but I do the calculations, and the legislative analyst's office do the calculations, and we come in and we say that he should have raised them by about $4 billion. He raised them by 2.5, so we'll see how that works out. The governor may be smarter than we think he is, because it was only a week after he did his budget that the stock market collapsed. So, so maybe he knew that was going to happen. But as a result, Prop 98 is still growing, but it's growing by a smaller amount. The most significant number on that chart is down on the bottom line where it says 2.6%. So the education budget, which has been growing in double digits, is now growing at 2.6%. Yes? Okay, now this is an hour discussion if you don't. So everybody got it? Prop 98 sets a floor under school funding. So the state owes us 40% of every new dollar, unless they've made cuts. If they've made cuts, then they owe us more till the cuts are made up. So for the past 4 years, we've been getting 90% of every new dollar. Now we're back down to 40% again. Okay, so thank you for that, Janie. And so for the first time in 4 years, education is only getting 2.6% next year, an increase of 2.6% overall. The rest of the budget, non-education, is getting over 8%. So for the past 4 years, we've been getting a lot more than the rest of the budget. Now the rest of the budget is getting more than we are. Okay, so let's see if I can make that go. Okay. So in the governor's press conference, he started to warn people about the next recession. And he didn't predict that it was going to occur, but this number that he put out I thought was pretty fantastic. Have you ever watched the governor present his budget? He doesn't wear a lapel mic or carry a hand mic, right? So he has the microphone on the podium over there. And then he has an easel over here with charts on it, which he very often holds upside down and sideways when he grabs them. And he yells back at the podium, because that's the only microphone in the press conference, right? And it's kind of entertaining to watch him do the presentation. But when he said that even a moderate recession, the state would have a $55 billion deficit, I was floored. I don't know how you get that number. I've worked on that number, and I can get to a deficit, but I can't be that precise. 55 billion, that would be a huge number for the state. So what does the state do when it sees a recession coming? It tries to build its reserve, and over most of the last 7 years, the state hasn't had a reserve. It's been negative every single year. 1 year, it was a negative reserve of $10 billion. That can spoil your whole day. And so the governor is now trying to get way above that. This governor is very, very different than he was when he was governor in the 70s. And, you know, most governors want to spend money and create programs on their watch, and maybe somebody else ends up holding the bag. But this governor is not that way, and certainly not now. So, so the law requires the governor, with his new rainy day fund under Proposition 2, to put $2.6 billion in this year, but he plans on putting $4.6 billion in. So he plans on having an even bigger rainy day fund than the law would require. And the legislative analyst supports that, building reserves for the next recession. So, all right, let's keep going here. There we go. So, I'm sure that it was operator error. I did something to it. All right, so Nobody's forecasting a recession next year, except me. The governor made a comment. Nobody ever forecasts a recession. Well, my recession forecasts have been perfect. I have forecast exactly 10 of the last 2 recessions. Think about that. Okay, and so I forecast one every year. And I want to be prepared for it when it comes. Do you know that out of our noted economists in the United States and around the world, not one predicted the Great Recession? If you missed a train wreck like that, what's the chance you're going to catch a little one? Not so much. And nobody really predicted it. So the governor's saying, I'm worried about a recession. I'm worried about things slowing down. But right now, if you looked at the numbers, the employment number is the most positive number. And so most of our revenues for schools come from sales and income taxes. And so employment is good. Gross domestic product was up 3.5% in the third quarter. That's a really good quarter. But for the fourth quarter, which came in a week after the governor's budget came out, it was up only 0.7 again. So it's been down in that 1% range for a long time. That's not good for us. And I'll talk about energy in just a minute, but when the demand for capital, the demand for energy, the demand for labor is low, sooner or later, you're going to have a problem. And so we worry a little bit about that. And we'll talk about the falling stock market. Let's start right here. So the governor barely got his budget out and got the ink dry, and the stock market dropped 10%. And all of a sudden, people are saying, why is the market going down? And we have the collapse in China. And last summer, China devalued its currency, and there's a lot of debt. How many of you own debt in Chinese denominations? Anybody? Anybody? Oh, no. All of you do. If you have a mutual fund, if you have a bank account, if you have a CD, all of that is backed by international debt. I mean, I know that Mike Gallo can tell you about the international interdependency of economies, right? And when you look at that interdependency, when something happens anywhere in the world, we're all in it now. The world's become a much smaller place. So all of a sudden we have a debt crisis in China, and we have a debt crisis here, and our stock market drops like a rock. And so we need to be able to think about that a little bit. So when the Dow Jones was off 1,500 points, it's up part of it now. The governor's budget all of a sudden looked like it was optimistic instead of pessimistic. I thought he was very conservative, and then all of a sudden we see that because the governor is counting on the revenue from personal income taxes, but also capital gains. How many of you know that the top 1% of taxpayers in California pay half the income taxes? How many of you know that the other half of income taxes is paid by the next 49%? How many of you know that half of the residents of California pay no income tax? So sometimes my conservative friends will say to me, well, you've got half the people in California not paying an income tax. And we should collect taxes. And I remind them, these are not people who don't want to pay taxes. These are people who during the 40 years when California went from first to worst in public education got left behind. They would like to have a job where they made enough money to pay some taxes, but we have a whole generation that we basically left behind. During the time after World War II in particular in California, I grew up in California, in Orange County, and what happened was we had the most educated workforce in the world. And we had free public education all the way through college. And companies came to California because of that educated workforce. And that educated workforce paid a lot of taxes that allowed us to build roads and schools and have the best education systems in the world and have this infrastructure of private industry supporting it. And then somewhere along the way, we lost our way. And when we lost our way, we gave up on public education. And we fell from the top 3 in the nation in funding for public education to the bottom 5. And we stayed there for 40 years. And during that time, all of a sudden, industry is looking at Texas and Alabama and places like that. And I remember being a kid in Orange County, and we thought about the kids in Alabama and Mississippi. I apologize if you're from there, going to school barefoot. without books and all of those kinds of things. That was what we heard as kids. And now what we find is that those states spend more than we do, a lot more than we do on public education. And their students are doing better than our students. So what does that portend for the future? So we have a chance to catch up, and you are catching up. And the results that you're producing are going to be a model for the state. But, you know, it takes time. It really does take time. Students who are here for 13 years and have 1 or 2 years of the new system don't really get much out of it. By the time they've had 7 or 8 or 10 or 12 years out of it, now you really have some changes that are coming, and so we need to stay the course and let our students have that kind of a chance. In the meantime, this money that's coming from taxes is funding schools, and it's been going up like a rocket ship, and that's why we have been able to increase funding for schools, in particularly your district, over the last few years. The governor's counting on 10% of the state's revenues coming from capital gains. Capital gains go down when the stock market goes down. So, but of course, the capital gains that we collect this April will be from transactions people did last year before December, and that was before the collapse. So I think the capital gains will be fine for this year, but I think maybe next year we've got some worries about that. And taxpayers don't always have to sell. They can wait, take the capital gain another time, or hold on to it. So as a result, the governor could have some economic problems. So stock prices reflect the perceptions of business for future earnings. And I always like to go through the mechanics of this a little bit. I don't want to teach an accounting lesson, although I could. You know, I went to the University of Oklahoma, and we are famous for 2 things. Football players. I didn't hear anybody cheering. And being able to do long discussions on economics, because there ain't nothing else to do in Oklahoma. And so, anyway, and so as we look at the economics and we say, what is the reality of the future? Low demand for money. That's why we have near 0 interest rates. Japan lowered its interest rates last week, and the rates in Japan are now below 0. Negative interest rates. You go to the bank and say, I want to deposit 100 yen, and they say, okay, we're going to charge you if you want us to keep it. Negative interest rates. And ours, you know, are very, very small. Warren Buffett showed at his annual meeting a couple of years ago how low interest rates were. He had $1 billion that he had invested for a year. And it was in typical CD kind of an investment at 1/4%. If he's getting 1/4%, the rest of us aren't going to do much better than that. So when we look at China and we look at the slowdown, we have to talk a little bit about energy. A year ago, when oil dropped from $100 a barrel to $50 a barrel, the average American family saved $2,000 a year in their cost of energy, gas, heating oil, those kinds of things, $2,000 a year. And the stock market went up, and everybody thought that was a positive thing because consumers tend to spend that $2,000. When oil went down to $30, where it is now people started to think, wait a minute, when there's no demand for capital, there's no demand for energy, there's no demand for raw materials, sooner or later, that's going to affect the labor market, and we now see a downtrend coming. And that's what has caused a lot of the turmoil on Wall Street. These 300 and 400 point ups and downs indicate the nervousness that we have on Wall Street. But it also means that as a taxpayer-funded organization, public schools should be worried about that. The last bullet is important. When I was the deputy soup in Long Beach 25 years ago, the cargo ships would come in, and they'd come in full, and then the cargo containers would stack up. They never went out. We were importing lots of stuff, and we were not exporting anything. Over the last 3 years, our exports have gone up tremendously high. And so those containers are leaving full. But when our dollar is strong, and it's still the safest currency in the world, and people run to the dollar when things get turbulent in the rest of the world, those dollars become more valuable, So our goods become more expensive to the rest of the world, and their goods become cheaper to us. So we worry a bit about the trade imbalance. So the minimum guarantee for Prop 98, this is kind of an arcane slide that Janet and Janie will like, and everybody else will say, why did he show us that? But Test 3 is the lowest amount that the state can give us. So we have Test 1, 2, and 3. Test 3 is the lowest amount, and the state forecasts that this will be a 16, 17, next year will be a Test 3 year. I don't think it'll end up a Test 3 year. I think the economics will be better than the governor does. But if it stays that way, it means that we would get a very low amount of new revenues for next year. So we look at the revenue collections, and we still believe that the governor has way underestimated revenues, and we think in May, when he does the statutory May revision, he's required by law to do that May revision, that he will have to add money, just like he did last year. So last year in January, he said, I'm going to give schools $4 billion more, and by May it was $6 billion, 50% more. And we think that it'll be higher. This year he says, I'm going to give you $2.8 billion. I don't know whether it'll be 3 or 4, but I think it'll be higher than 2.8 by the time we get to May. So the planning that your district does is as if you're going to get these numbers that the governor just put out in January, but then we always have to have a plan for what if we get more or less, and this year I think we will get more. So Proposition 30 was passed in 2012, November of 2012, and the state said if we don't pass this temporary tax, we're going to make another cut to schools. And that temporary tax was partly sales tax, which expires this year, and partly income tax, which expires in 2018. All of the state's projections are as if those taxes expire. But there's a move to try to put a ballot measure on to extend those temporary taxes. The governor says that he won't do it unless there's another vote of the people. And so he's doing that. He's kept his word, and he said they were temporary. And it would extend them for a long period of time. So let me just kind of give you the math on that. Back in 2012, here's how the story read. The state's budget had dropped from $100 billion in revenues to $84 billion. That's a big drop, 16%. Schools had taken the majority of the cuts. Schools were going to take another cut if Prop 30 didn't pass. So the voters went out, and with the support of public education, every entity in public education supported it, and the voters voted for Prop 30. Okay, so they voted for the sales tax, they voted for the income tax. Now, if I were to tell that same story, the state's revenues without Prop 30 this year would be $107 billion, the highest in history. With Prop 30 revenues this year, the state's revenues are $114 billion, way highest in history. Education hasn't taken a cut for 3 years, and there are no threatened cuts on the horizon. So how do you sell that to the voters if you put it on? Well, I think there's just one thing you have to think about, and that is, will the 99% of people that will never pay this tax vote that the top 1% should continue to pay it? Right? Okay, will the 99% vote for the 1% to pay it? Because it's only the top 1% that pay that tax. And the polling shows that we are vigorously willing to support that 1% paying that tax, okay? And that it will pass. So we'll look at that and we'll follow it. This is my last slide, and it is you. And so my numbers are exactly wrong, but they are approximately right. Let me just say that right up front, okay? Because I use the state database to calculate these numbers. And if nothing changed in your district, no declining enrollment, no increase in enrollment, no change to charter schools or anything, my chart would probably be right. But all those other things happen, and they're not in the state database. So if Janet or Janie were to give you a number, it would be different than my number, and their number would be right. My number is close, but I might miss it, 10 or 15 bucks. The district that I was in this morning, I think I missed it by $3 or something. But sometimes it's a little bit more than that. So the way you read this is pretty simple, even though it looks complicated. In 2015-16, the current year, you are receiving a total from the state of $9,959. $9,959. And $1,400 of it is new money for this year. $1,400 is new money for this year. At full implementation of the local control funding formula, the state wants you to have $11,323. I rarely go to a district where that number is 11,000. The average is about 8,800. So why are you getting more? Because you have so many children who are generating that extra money because they are English learners, they're free and reduced price, they're meals, they are foster children. You have a high need in this district. And by the way, let me just make an editorial comment that some of you might find helpful. So we have some superintendents who from time to time will look at a district like this one and they'll say, look at that, they're getting $3,000 more than we are. And that's true. And what I say to them is, okay, I want you to come from your affluent district, and I want, you know, superintendents don't have to stay in the same job. They can move. I want you to go to one of these 95% districts where we have all these needs, and we'll give you $3,000 more, but you have to guarantee your students will perform at the level of that district in that affluent area. And they all say, well, you couldn't do that for $3,000. Because that number is still way below the national average. Okay, and so when you put it in perspective, it is more than other California districts, but by national standards, that's way low, okay? And less than half what the highest spending states spend, okay? And so I want to put it in that perspective. In California, we have the highest class sizes in the nation. When I go to a national conference, I can pick out the people from California. They look tired. We have 50% more kids in our classes. We have the lowest numbers of nurses, librarians, administrators, classified employees, counselors. We're in the bottom 3 in all of those categories in supporting our students. And so there are only 2 kinds of people in your district. There are teachers and there are people who support teaching, right? And when we reduce the support for teachers, we're cutting into that teaching time. And so rebuilding California's infrastructure and education is important for us. For 16-17, that's my 3rd bar. So the middle bar is how much the state wants you to have. And I'm going to skip some of the math. But you're only going to get another $670 for next year. This year, you got an additional $1,400. Next year, you're going to get $670. This year, the governor put up $6 billion for Prop 98. Next year, he's planning on putting up 2.8. So that's why you're getting about half. Now, the good news is that 670 is likely to be wrong. And in May, I think the governor will step it up, and I think maybe you get more. Well, I think you do get more, but I don't know how much more. We'll see how the governor sees that number in May. So, but in the meantime, you've got some of that money to the base grant, you've got some of that money to the supplemental and concentration grants. You have done an extraordinarily good job in this district, better than any district I've been in staying in front of the supplemental and concentration grant programs. You have put the money first to programs for students, and a lot of districts haven't done that. A lot of them have used the money to stop deficit spending and to make up for past bills that they needed to pay and those kinds of things. And they're going to run into some trouble at the end of this thing when they have to account for the programs for the students. You are way ahead on programs for students. And I think that if you were to look at how you spent your money, you don't have to spend as much on the supplemental as I have up there. Janie, do you want to say anything about that? Because that's an area where I think you really need to take a bow in this district.
So we looked at the total calculations and we are very close. We have some declining ADA, and we'll talk about that when I present a few slides. We've already allocated, as Ron said, more money towards supplemental concentration. Now, although the LCFF was supposed to be very simple and the calculation in this transition between full funding and where we are today, it can be very complicated. And depending on how you calculate your floor, from the year before in your expenditures and what's allocated to supplemental concentration and what's to base, those delineations can be slightly different. And I just want to, just so thankful to be part of this district and all the work everyone in here has done, the superintendent, Dr. Flores, the whole board, Mike Gallo. So I'm just so appreciative of everything that's going on. And it's a tough job, but we have a lot to be thankful for. We've shown some presentations at the board meeting of some of the accomplishments. They weren't all inclusive of everything that the district has done to help support students, but it is quite significant and a lot to be proud of.
You know, Janie, I came here to talk about money, but you have changed the culture. This group of people, this extended cabinet, doesn't exist in any other districts. And because you are so inclusive, and Dr. Marsden, I really do give you the credit for showing the leadership to bring people together, but then they have to do it. They have to want to be here. They have to want to participate. And it makes your district different. If you didn't have money, but you had the culture that you're developing and the cooperation that you have, you will be successful. It is not the money that makes you successful. It is all the other things. The money helps. I mean, don't get me wrong. A little money helps, but a lot of districts have the money, but they don't have the rest of the things that you have. And so it's always my honor to be here to present and to keep you informed. I try to keep it short. When you're 103 and 4.5 inches tall, you try to get done before you wear out your welcome. But I would take questions if there are any. And then Janie, you're going to present some things, and we can take some more questions if you like. Okay, you're welcome.
I always please don't leave. So I always find it fascinating to listen to all the information about school finance. You all might not be as excited about it as I am, but I think that, Ron, every time I listen to school services, you catch something different. So I think it would be great if you took a few minutes at your table and talk about one thing that you learned that you didn't really know or you didn't understand as deeply from this presentation. And then maybe it'll generate some questions. We're so lucky to have him here. I'd like to really keep him on his toes and give him some tough questions. So take a couple minutes at your table. Talk about one key learning that you learned from today's presentation. So I hear a lot of conversations. Does anyone want to go first? Report out something, a new learning today? Do you want me to pick someone?
Well, Janie, while people are thinking, I did have a couple questions I thought I'd pitch to Ron. One, Ron, you mentioned on one of the slides around Prop 30, if the extension of Prop 30 fails, what would be the dollar amount impact per ADA for our district?
So on average, if the extension of Prop 30 failed, it would be about $500 a student. And so the original Prop 30 was about $650, but the sales tax is gone and it's going to stay gone. So this would just be the income tax that would be there. Now, because the state's economy has improved, we're not in danger of taking a cut if the successor to Prop 30 doesn't pass. It's what we're going to use that money for that I think is important to continue to grow.
Thanks, Ron. And then I wanted to also ask Robert, I know from SBTA they're working on an initiative right now to get signatures to get this on the ballot. So if you want to mention that, Robert.
Thank you, Dr. Marsden. So, I'll stand over here. Mr. Bennett, you were correct. 3 years ago, back in 2012, we launched a campaign to pass Proposition 30, and we did that with the Education Coalition. So we had parents, we had community members, we had administrators, school board members, everybody, for the same things that you talked about for the extension, which really benefited our community. That's going away now. So although our projections look good and our sustainable funding looks like we're moving along okay, it's at the outer years that we're not sure what's going to happen. We could have another recession, we could not. What we need to do is change the way we fund schools in the state of California so that we're not always waiting for a special measure or a little bit of pot of money to help us continue to educate our students. So we will be working now on Campaign 2016 to launch a second initiative, which we are calling the Children's Education and Healthcare Protection Act. One of the things that happens is we're always competing with hospitals and healthcare for elderly folk and for children in need. So we need to come up with a way where we can put those two initiatives together, again, looking at extending a tax increase for that top 1%, and how we can move it forward. So we are actually launching a campaign with our own people starting today to gather signatures because we have to get enough of them to qualify for it to be on the November ballot. So if you see teachers in your community, if you hear people talking about how you can get involved, that's one good way because this is going to be a part with the Education Coalition where we get everyone involved and so that we move it forward. So we are actually beginning that today. We have a huge meeting in about 45 minutes where we're going to be talking to our people and getting that out into the school sites and getting that out into the community so that we can continue to do some of the great work that we're doing here in San Bernardino.
Great, fantastic. Thanks, Robert. Appreciate that. And then, Ron, the second question I'll show you, if you don't mind going back one slide, I was going to mention this for the high school students that are here. So Ron mentioned earlier that it used to be a time when this number was, what, almost double in the state of California? And when I was in high school, we had driver's ed with a driver's ed teacher and cars that our high school owned to give us driver's education to get our license. If you can imagine that. That's how much money was in our schools at that point. And so there's that issue of adequacy of funding. And so I asked Ron, you know, if you were governor, how would you tackle that issue? Because that's an issue that's still a big challenge for our state.
So when I was in school in Orange County, by the way, we did have cars. They had been invented. They had square wheels, but anyway, no, it was a little while ago. But we had driver training. We had all those things. And so California used to be in the top 5 every single year on per student spending for public education, and our students performed in the top 5 every single year. And now we've dropped to the bottom 5, and unfortunately our student performance in a lot of our schools is right down there with the funding. I had the opportunity to work with another state on an adequacy suit some years ago. And it's been long enough ago, I can tell you how it actually came out. So in this other state, the small districts sued the state because they weren't getting as much as the big districts. The big districts sued the state because they claimed it wasn't adequate. A federal judge ordered that state to come up with a new finance system that would be fair, equitable, and adequate. Now, adequate, fair and equitable you can do. Adequate is a little bit harder. And so I was part of a team of just 4 people. And what we did, my job was the money part. And we had educators on that team, and what we did is we went in and we started with a clean sheet of paper. How many kids should be in a kindergarten class, a first grade class, a second grade class? How much should the teacher be paid? When should you have an aide? How much should the instructional materials be? How much should the busing cost, and so on? And we went through and we designed this finance system for this particular state, and when we did, it turned out it was going to cost about twice what they were spending. And so they were going to phase it in, and it happened to be a state that had a lot of money and not many kids, and so they adopted the plan just exactly as we wrote it. Okay, so 5 years later, the school funding in that state was up about 50%, and test scores hadn't moved at all. No improvement. And people are thinking, this is a bust. And Professor Jim Guthrie, who was one of the people on that survey, he's now the state superintendent for the state of Nevada, but Jim Guthrie was taking some heat for this, and so was I. You know, you've got to spend all this money and nothing's happening. Now it's been 15 years. And at 15 years, that state is in the top 3 in student performance in the United States. So that's the comment that I made. When I made that comment about it takes sometimes a little bit of time under the new system, 12 years under the old system and 1 under the new system doesn't show nearly as much change as having kids go all the way through the system in a better environment. And so I made that comment because of that relationship with that state. And money does matter, but also the structure matters. And we got class sizes down. We got, I mean, you know, all of those things happen with money. What's different when you go to another state? When you go to another state, you find libraries, nurses. You walk into a high school class and there are 15 kids and they're all there. I mean, that's the roster. It isn't, it isn't like my son. So anyway, I shouldn't pick on him. And he has a genetic defect. He now works in school business. And so he grew up possibly as a result of bad influence from someone in the family in school business. But still, what would I do if I were governor? What I would do is I would say, we're going to continue these temporary taxes, and we're going to commit every dime of it to public education, and we're going to continue the march beyond the LCFF goal, which was just to get us back where we were in 2007-8. We're going to continue it at least to the national average and beyond. We are a high-tax state with a low priority for public education. California spends more on every single commodity that states buy except public education. And we're last. You know, it's not like we're missing it by a little, we're last. And so that's what I think the governor should do. The governor has, in addition to the Prop 30 funds, he has the highest budget that any governor's ever had in the state of California. And even though he's to be praised for devoting as much of it as he has to public education, that was a payback, that was a recovery, that wasn't a gain. We now need to see a gain. Okay, there were some hands. Yes, sir. Let me bring the microphone over so people can hear you. We're all friends here.
Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate all the information. One question I have is that because of the inflation rate or the deflation rate or whatever is going to happen, the reserve rate for districts is like 2%. Do you suggest or do you recommend that the reserve rate for our district or other districts be increased in order to, like, just in case there's a deficit?
So the 2% is a minimum reserve, a minimum reserve, okay? And most districts over the past 20 years have carried 12, 13%. That's been the average. When we have bad times, they carry a bigger reserve, as you would expect. When it's raining, we want the rainy day fund to have money in it. But during the budget deliberations a year and a half ago, we ended up with the most absurd, idiotic reserve policy in the United States. And so instead of talking about a minimum reserve and trusting the board on local control, right, to set the maximum at what they think it needs to be, we now have in state law, under certain conditions that haven't been met, the governor says they won't be met for another 4 or 5 years, but under those conditions, the minimum for your district would remain 2%, the maximum would be 4%. If you ever enter a recession with 4% in reserve, you're going to see people laid off and students losing programs on day one. This last recession, you had a big enough reserve that you didn't have to make those substantial cuts until 2 or 3 years into it. Most of the recessions are over in a year and a half, so you have enough reserve that you don't have to do those layoffs or salary rollbacks. In 25 years, I never had to do furlough days and salary rollbacks until this really deep recession. So I believe that the local board should make the rules. Let me just give you a reference for that. So with local control by school boards, we had every district in California, 1,000 of them, certifying 3 times a year during a 6-year period, 18,000 certifications that they could or could not remain solvent. We had exactly one district that went insolvent and had to get a state loan. 1 out of 1,000 with 18,000 opportunities. We have a better record than, I mean, anybody know of a city around here that went bankrupt, or a county that went bankrupt, or businesses that went bankrupt? We have a better record than any of those. My kids occasionally remind me, they ask me, how's your Washington Mutual stock doing? Anybody remember Washington Mutual Bank, one of the biggest in the world? That stock is worth nothing, and I remind them that is now their inheritance. Okay, and so, any other questions? There was another question. Robert, why don't you do one? Make it an easy one.
Yeah, just real quick. On slide 6, you included an information on the May revise. Thank you for doing that. This district, after last year, we actually received $40 million more than we had budgeted. So things are looking good from what we hear. So we could hopefully anticipate looking at possibly even more funding than what is projected now. Yes? Okay, so it was an easy question. And thank you for highlighting the class size issue. We do have some of the most highest class sizes, especially in our secondary levels, so that's an area we could do more. I hope the next presentation highlights, despite the Proposition 30, okay, let's assume it will expire, and let's assume we don't get another initiative on the ballot. We are projected to go from $325 million in 2012 to $571 million in 2021. So we do have a steady increase, provided we don't have some kind of catastrophe or recession. What is a recommendation in terms of moving forward for how we should do business in terms of spending?
Thank you, Robert. So moving forward, if you look at the chart, and I haven't seen the chart, but I know what it's got to look like. And what it's going to look like is a rapid growth in your revenues, 14, 15% a year for a little while to get you restored to the cuts that the state had made, right? And then it kind of levels off. And so you need to go from the mindset of building new programs to a mindset of maintaining what we have in a lower environment. After the governor passed the local control funding formula, he decided that he was going to more than double our retirement rate that we have to pay. And so the districts are now contributing more every single year, and that's taken a lot of money off the table. So, so there are a lot of expenses that go up, but I'd be thinking now for your district about how can we maintain our momentum. You're going to need to continue to have competitive compensation. The governor intended for you to be able to attract and retain the best, and that's why he provided money for that. So you're going to have to do all of that. So Janie, do you have the hook? It's getting dark outside. I don't want to overstay my time.
Robert, could you say the numbers again for current? I have 470 for the current year. So in 15, 16, 470 to 500.
So I went from 2012.
Oh, I see. From the beginning. Got it. Okay, excellent. Okay, excellent. And then, Ron, we also had a question, and I think a lot of folks know about this, is the increased impact of PERS and STIRS for our district alone from 15, 16 through full implementation of LCFF and the full span of the new charges is over $36 million to our district, and so I'm wondering what's going on at the state level.
Okay, so the state, after it passed the local control funding formula, the governor said, we have this other problem to solve, and it's our retirement funds are underfunded, and we're going to make it up over 30 years, and the way we're going to make it up is we're going to take the employer's share from 8.25% for teachers up to 19.1% of salary. So more than double. The same for classified. We're going to take them over 20%. And so the district is paying the bulk of that. Employees are paying a little, the state's paying a little, the district is paying most of it. So I used to say that if you got a 2% increase, you could cover the cost of step and column, which is salary movement for seniority, and you could cover the cost of health benefits. Now, with the increase in STIRS and PERS, it takes about 4%. In a year where you don't get a 4% increase, you're spending more than the new revenues will be. So I watched the stock market, and the state had said STIRS is underfunded by $80 billion. They were going to do a new actuarial study. When they did the new actuarial study, I was pretty sure that with the growth in the stock market and the investments that STIRS and PERS have, that they would say that the rate should be lowered a little bit. They did not. The legislative analyst's office came back and said that the way the state has managed the funds, the shortfall is actually a little bit higher than projected. So I think we are going to actually take those increased costs. I don't think the state's going to lay off of those. And I think that the state's decision to say that we're going to push all those costs down to school districts has a tremendous effect on your district. The governor put up $17.5 billion to restore education over this period of time for the implementation of the local control funding formula. And then after that, 1/4 of that money, $4.5 billion, goes into the retirement fund. So basically, we're only going to get 3/4 of the way restored, and the governor's going to say we're done. That's another reason I think he needs to continue on especially if we get a successor to Prop 30. When we work together, when the employee organizations and management and the public all work together, we've never lost. We've never lost. And I mean that in terms of getting bonds through the public, getting taxes through the public, suing the state. CTA is excellent at suing the state. And they join with CSBA, the California School Boards Association, and they win. And they win on behalf of public education. And so, so while sometimes we have a little controversy in the family, a little conflict, overall, in a state that doesn't believe in public education, we've done a pretty good job of maintaining some semblance of programs for our kids. You've been very patient and had a question for a long time. Do we have room for one more? Right? Do you still have the question? Maybe. Ask me who's going to win the Super Bowl. I can tell you with perfect prediction. Oh, is it off? Here, we want people to be able to hear you.
It's kind of a question, but it's also maybe, kind of some partial statements or whatever on some of the stuff that I heard. I mean, you said that, employment is improving. I mean, I don't see it improving here. Carrier just announced they're moving 1,500 or whatever it is jobs back into Mexico. We're the highest, if not the highest, one of the highest tax states. I pay 11.3% to state tax. The infrastructure is not getting maintained. It's decaying like every place else. And we talk about taxing that 1% like it's okay, we're only going to go after the rich people. The same thing happens when you do that to businesses and increase payroll taxes. What's going to happen to the 1%? First of all, those 1% are probably whatever industry and light manufacturing exists in the state, and so you drive them out to Nevada. I wonder if anybody makes a comparison between what's going on in California for the last 40 years with states like Arizona and New Mexico. I mean, in this state, we're overregulated, overtaxed, pay the highest utility rates, highest income tax, and we're still talking about raising taxes. And I think that it's counterproductive because all you do is drive businesses out of the state. I mean, that's where I'm coming from. I know this also costs about half as much. I have friends that are investing in different things in Texas and Arizona. One of my friends had to actually get a cell phone number with an area code for Arizona because if he called on his California phone, everything cost twice as much. If he called on to the same architected firm in California, but if he used his Arizona area code, it was half as much.
So, what's your point? All of that stuff is accurate. We are a high-tax state, and we simply, like a lot of political entities, the California legislature's appetite for more money is insatiable, right? And so they will always want another tax, both parties. So let me make that comparison. And remember, when people say, well, we don't have to beat Texas, we just have to worry about California, I went to the University of Oklahoma. We have to beat Texas, okay? All right, okay, and so when we look at those comparisons, I want to go back to your unemployment rate. If you start about Riverside and San Bernardino County, and you go east and you go north, those are the high areas of unemployment still. The overall unemployment rate is lower, but the major employment is right on the coast, all the way up from Marin, all the way down to San Diego. And the inland areas still are double digits and worse. And so, how the state uses its money has always been a question. And I can't argue with any of those points. I think that our state has made some really bad decisions. How could you go from first to worst in public education and then not say that's a bad decision? So I don't see those things getting fixed real fast, but I can't argue with the points.
One of the best things that Governor Brown did was he terminated or removed the economic redevelopment agencies from the city because they took percentage of tax revenue increases.
So the redevelopment agencies are gone, and you think that's a great move. And let me just tell you two things about the redevelopment agencies. The county that had the lowest amount of money tax revenue going to redevelopment agencies was San Francisco County. The county in the state of 58 counties that had the highest amount of money, tax money, going to redevelopment agencies was San Bernardino County. And no, I didn't say corruption. You said corruption. I just said that that's where the money went. Okay, Janie's got the hook because it's getting dark and she wants to do her slide.
We want to thank Ron very much for everything. And I'm actually going to close this portion of the meeting with just one more conversation, and that's about our average daily attendance. School Services does a number of articles on the importance of having students in school. As most of you know, we staff our students based on our enrollment. If kids aren't in school, they're not engaged in learning, and we're not receiving funding for that as well. And so while we are near the bottom in funding, this is a positive way that we can bring in more revenue. We can do more to help support our students. And so our ADA is down this year, and we get paid at P2, which is in mid-March, late March. And we still have time to change that because it will impact our budget next year by about $700,000 based on current year ADA. So that's my last plug of the day of the importance of having students in school and doing what we can to help support them. Thank you so much. Oh, Perry.
Thank you, Janie. So we're going to move into our balanced life discussion, and I think it's very fitting to talk about financial health. And this is going to be your personal financial health. And kudos to Janie and Janet. We're working with a little bit of money in our household. She's working with $500 million and trying to figure out how to spend that. Anyways, I do have a couple things to set up before we get going on the computer. I'm going to ask that a couple people hand these out, one to each individual. And then as they're doing that, if you guys can do me a favor and talk at your table. You know the balanced life, we're looking at physical health, we're looking at financial health, social health, psychological health, and so on and so forth. What I'd like for you to do is talk at your table. You don't have to share specifics, just kind of share how you're doing in the area of financial health. Again, you don't have to share specifics, but just kind of speak generally as I set up real quick. How you doing? So let's go ahead and wrap those conversations up. Anyone in here feel that they've done a great job in this area of their life, the financial health? Anyone feel they do a good job with that? See some nods? Anyone want to admit that they don't do a good job with that area? I'm going to put my hand up as well. As you can see with the recession, sometimes school districts don't have a choice. Sometimes families don't have a choice, and there's some things that are going on outside of the household that cause some stress in regards to the financial piece. Sometimes we make poor decisions, and we have a pattern of making poor decisions. Therefore, we're not necessarily financially healthy. And I'll stand right here in front of you and say, you know what, I've made poor financial decisions, and there were things out of my control that led to me not necessarily being financially healthy. And I appreciate the conversations we're having in regards to this balanced life. And so I'm really trying in some areas, and this is an area that I'm really excited that I'm growing in. So I'm going to share with you kind of some strategies that I've used, and they've been just absolutely life-changing in regards to the area of financial health. So you do have in front of you, before we get to that, we're going to talk about 3 levels. We're going to talk big picture in regards to money and how to manage money. And then we're going to talk a little bit about philosophy, which is probably not going to be new news to you. It's going to be something you've probably seen. And then we're going to talk about strategy. So I don't know if you guys have heard the analogy. Dr. Marsden, I believe, probably shared it in front of this group in regards to money and your household and your budget. And he always uses the example, if you make $10 and you spend $9, what do you get? You get happy face, correct? So we're at big picture right now. And if you make $10 and you spend $11, you guessed it, you get a sad face. So there's big picture. Now, in regards to setting priorities, I mean, the monies can go however you want to spend $9, and they can go wherever you want. You can put it towards this, you can put it towards that. It's really about you and your priorities. It's about you and your family sitting down and discussing those priorities and saying, this is where our money is going to go. And in front of you, you have the 7 baby steps. Dave Ramsey, you guys see that? And you're probably all familiar with this. Who is familiar with this? So mostly everyone, there's a few people in the room. Students, I urge you to pay attention through this whole presentation so you don't make the same mistakes many of us in this room made. But anyways, I'm just briefly going through this. It's really about this YNAB that I'm going to share and how that's helped me to integrate these baby steps. But Dave Ramsey, as you guys, many of you know, he has these steps. The first thing you want to do is you want to save $1,000. Before you do anything, before you start putting your money away to retirement, before you start paying down your credit card bills and whatever it may be, you need $1,000. Put it to the side because emergencies happen. And when emergencies happen and you don't have $1,000, you're going to go to your credit card and you're going to start charging and doing that. Or you're not going to be able to take care of the emergency. So always have that $1,000. And then as soon as you have the $1,000 and it's set aside for an emergency, you want to then start paying down your debt. And that includes credit card debts, personal loans. Even Dave Ramsey talks about your student loans and so forth, not necessarily your house loan. And he talks about the snowball strategy. You pay off the one that you owe the least, and you feel good about yourself, and then whatever you were paying to that one, you want to put towards the next one, and then you pay that off. So you're not to put away any money into retirement, college funds, or anything until you get that debt completely out of there. And then the third step, you want a bigger emergency fund. Let's say you had a job, something happened, and you need 3 months of salary, so start putting that away. So on, so forth, until you build wealth and give. So this is kind of the philosophy. So the big picture, you want happiness. I have agreed and made the commitment to myself that this is the philosophy and the priorities I'm going to use in this. Now, the question then is, how are we going to keep track of those priorities and monitor those priorities? So what I'd like you to do at your table real quick, I want you to talk about what you use to budget. Do you just do it in your head? Do you use mint.com? Do you use an Excel spreadsheet? Do you write it on a piece of paper? So just talk about some strategies you use to make sure you're staying within your budget. Would anyone like to share out how they do their budget? Pen to paper? Just wing it? Just swipe the card and keep your fingers crossed? I hear some of the students saying that too. Uh-oh. Anyone like to share out? Ron?
Okay, when we first started doing this extended cabinet meeting and Dr. Marsden challenged us to save $1,000, I didn't know where I was going to get it on a substitute salary. So what I started doing was putting all my quarters in a jar. And through the years, I've got 4, maybe 5 jars now full of quarters. And the thing that's really great about that is I know I got my $1,000. And if I have to use it, I have to go to the bank and dump it in. But you know, because it's in quarters, I don't spend it. And I was just sharing with them, last week I had a lady come to me that needed some money. And so I gave her a jar of quarters. She took it to the bank, and it was $317. Then she gave me back the jar. So now I got another jar to fill. So I feel good about that. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Any others? All right, let's move on. So, turn the page over. So what I'm going to share today, so we had big picture, happy face, philosophy, I used Dave Ramsey, and then now I want to get to the weeds in regards to the strategy that I use, and it works for me. And I want you to know this is something you pay for. It's online. It's $45 for the full year. It's like $5 a month. I can assure you that this will save you significant money in your household. I do not work for YNAB. I'm not here as a YNAB employee and so forth. I'm here because this works for me, and I want it to work for you if you feel appropriate. So anyways, they have a philosophy. And if you were to go to ynab.com, and they have so much literature, blogs, and stuff that's very easy to read. There's videos, and it really talks about this philosophy. And I'm gonna start going down here. Rule number 1, you give every dollar a job. So what you do is you get paid, figure out where the money's gonna go. So place it into categories. It would be like if you have all these quarters or whatever it may be, and this jar is for clothing, and this jar is going to be for rent, and this jar is the house payment. I get all these quarters. I got to figure out how much I'm going to put here, how much I'm going to put there. So this philosophy is when you get paid, put your money somewhere, because if you don't put it somewhere, it's going to end up out. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2 is embrace your true expenses. We know our monthly expenses, but there's also expenses that hit us that we're like, duh, I forgot about that one. The annual expenses, can anyone think of something that comes up once a year and you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot about that? And taxes, what was that? April 15th. Anniversary, your tags for your car, Christmas. There's all of these things that you don't assign money traditionally until it's time to put money to it, and you're going to have to take the money from somewhere else. So it's talking about really embrace your monthly true expenses. If you want $500, $600 for Christmas time, you need to save and put $50 a month for Christmas or whatever holiday at that point in time. And rule number 3 is to roll with the punches. You know what? My wife and I, we went out and spent a little too much money on dinner this month. You know what? We did. And that was the choice that we made. And it's not the end of the world. I just need to take some money from another bucket and put it into that area. And then now I know I have less money in this bucket because the choice I made was to spend a little more money here. So roll with the punches. It's okay, as long as you spend $9 and not $11. And then the last thing is to age your money. And I'm going to show you this thing here. It's online. You can do it from your iPad, your iPhone, whatever it may be. But the last thing is age your money. And they talk about the rice distillers. You know how the rice goes in and it comes out of the bottom? Are you guys familiar with that? What else is something that you put in it's full, and then, what was that? The funnel, like the rice funnel, the huge rice funnels. And when the rice funnels are full, that's good because you can eat and so on and so forth. But when it's low, that's not good. And aging your money talks about you want to have your money in there and spend it down the road. You want to age your money. You want to keep as much money as you can and use this month's money to pay for next month's bills and so on and so forth. So really, you don't want to get your money and spend it right away. You want to age your money. So those are the 4 things. So I'm going to share with you, hopefully you can see this. So here, it looks like this. I put up a dummy one. I was actually thinking this would be great in regards to just our district budget and how Janet did that one worksheet. This works perfect. But anyways, let's say here's the budget. So I'm going to go here to my checking account. This isn't my true budget. This is an example budget. I'm just going to delete this real quick. So let's say we start here. So what we have in my checking account, I don't have any money. I do have an emergency fund here, and I have $750 there. I got a couple credit cards, 3 months saving. I would structure my budget like that because I use the Dave Ramsey, so I'm going to be systematic in regards to where my money goes. So let's say I get paid, twice a month. Let's say I get $1,000. So this is to be budgeted. It's something that I got. The payee is going to be San Bernardino City Unified School District. And I got an inflow of $1,000. So what we have here, you see my checking account. I now have $1,000 there. And if I go to my budget, right here, to be budgeted, I have $1,750. I have this $750 there. So what you do is each month you're going to budget a certain amount of money. So let's say my rent is, I'm just going to use some round numbers, $200. So it took the $200 out of to be budgeted. So it's going to keep track of all my money. My water is 100, and then let's say this one, I'm just going to change something here. I want this actually to say emergency fund. And what we want to do is we want $1,000 here. So what you do here is you can move these categories wherever you want. You can add categories. You could subtract categories. You can, if you have $450 to be budgeted this month and you have already paid all your bills, you see up there, hey, I got $450, you can go on to March, and then you can see, hey, you know what, I got $450 extra dollars I didn't spend last month, so there's $450 available there. Let's say that I spent rent mortgage. So I had a transaction, I'm going to say A, B, C. So these are all my transactions. This was my rent mortgage. Let's say I budgeted $200 and I actually paid $300. I'm going to go to my budget here. Oh my gosh, you overspent right there. So I could do a couple things. One is I could pull some money. I got $100 still left over here, so I might want to transfer this money, move the $100. I want to move that to rent mortgage. because you know what, I roll with the punches. So, and there's plenty of webinars that tell you every technical aspect of it, but the things here is, number one, your checking account, you get paid. It's going to tell you exactly how much money you get paid there. Your job is to make this zero. You want to put all the money in the different categories. And then what happens is you just roll with the month, and then you see where you're at, and it'll tell you if you spend here, you got $50 left here, $20 left here, and it'll tell you, you know what, you're in the negative here, so you need to go borrow it from somewhere else. So it's really just, it's almost as though you got all these 50 accounts, and you're just moving the money within the accounts, but it's your one account. So number one is to budget all your money, give it $1. Number two is when you add these categories, you want to make sure that you're including those expenses that happen once a year, twice a year, once every few years. So make sure you're putting a little bit, even if it's $5. So I have one that says YNAB. It's $5. I pay once a year, so I'm putting $5 a month in for the YNAB. And then the third thing is it's okay if you overspend in a certain category. You just move the money from somewhere else and just roll with the punches. And then the last piece, and you see over here, as time goes on, as the month progresses, as the months progress, it's going to tell you, here's how old the money is in your account. So it might say 6 days. So it says when you get paid, usually you spend the money you get paid within 6 days. So it kind of calculates that. So again, feel free to go on there. You can try it for 34 days for free. 3 things: big picture, smiley face, spend less than you make. Number 2, whatever strategy or philosophy or priorities you have, it might be this, it might be something else, it might be just you and your family sitting down together and determining those priorities. And then number 3, this has really helped me to make sure that I'm spending and keeping within the budget that I established. So that's my presentation. So thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Perry. And thank you to Ron Bennett again. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attendance today. If you could, fill out a plus delta card about what went well during this meeting, what you maybe learned, suggested changes for improvement, or what maybe was missing goes on the back. If you could leave those for us, that would be fantastic. And have a great afternoon. Thank you so much.